Well, the minimum wage is the floor under wages, and it's which keeps wages up in the particularly the bottom of the labor market. So we have people with lesser skills doing a lot of service jobs and so forth. With the low minimum wage, it allows employers to keep the wages down. So as long as we keep a minimum wage at a very low level, a lot of people are making less than they would or what they should make for what they do. And so it's just really important that you push that wage up to a decent level so that people can't be exploited.
Thank you.
Well, we have the lowest possible minimum wage in the country. There's 29 states in the District of Columbia have raised their minimum wage. Every state around us has raised it. We're still at 7.25, so we are not helping our basic working people to stay ahead of inflation. In fact, we've lost a tremendous amount of the value of the minimum wage over the past 10 years. So we're not helping. We're in fact going out of our way not to help people at the bottom of the economic structure. Well, I'm sort of involved in a lot of strategy, supervision of people, sort of writing and sort of studying the issues and helping to sort of create a platform or what it is that we're trying to do, working with other groups. The organization more broadly does a lot of work to help people find jobs, to help people that are facing foreclosures, prevent them from loss of their houses, people with problems with their real estate taxes and things like that, their unemployment benefits. So we have a lot of direct service that we help people, and then we do the organizing where we try to make change, broader change for everybody. Well, we have been organizing in 10 or 12 cities around the state. One of the problems in Pennsylvania is that places like Philadelphia, where we are all pretty much Democratic and support, our legislators support raising the minimum wage. The problem is upstate, there's a lot of legislators that don't support it, even though there's tremendous numbers of low-wage workers. So we've been organizing people around the state, and that's been very important. We've had a number of days of action where we've had 10, 12, 13 cities turn out to do events, get publicity. The problem basically is very simple. The Republican Party controls both houses of the legislature. The leadership has made it plain that they're not going to move the bill. So what they do is, rather than have a vote and see what people do, they don't allow a vote. So it's been 10 years since the last time the state legislature voted on minimum wage. They keep the bills blockaded in committee. We've done a lot of work putting pressure on the committee chairs. Unfortunately, their districts are safe Republican districts, and they're able to just hold out. But really what it is, it's the Republican leadership has made a commitment to not have a vote. We're quite clear that if they did have a vote, it would pass, because 74% of the population supports $10 an hour minimum wage, 3 out of 4 people. So these politicians are not silly enough to vote against that if it comes up. So rather than vote to do something that would be maybe against the interests of their business base, they don't allow a vote, and that's where we are. There's no vote. So and that's where we're stuck, and we just can't get the bills moved onto the floor so that we can have a fair vote. We would say let democracy rule, let people vote up or down. And we think if we got the vote, it would pass. A substantial increase would pass. There's a myth that everybody is making our teenagers working, buy sneakers and so forth. And the reality is, it's not that tremendous numbers of people are working in service industries, working in janitorial, working in nursing homes, working in retail stores, working in fast food restaurants. I mean, a tremendous number of people work in those kind of industries, and they get paid these low wages, and they're not teenagers. In fact, large numbers of them are raising kids. Most of them are full-time workers. We're 80% of, what's the number here? It's like 90% of them are not teenagers or above the age of 20. So, it sounds nice. It makes it easy if you're against raising the minimum wage to just say it's a bunch of teenagers, and it's unfortunately, it's not the case. If it were just a bunch of teenagers, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad situation, but it's not. It's way too many people raising kids and trying to support a family, trying to keep a roof over their head. you know, a lot of people can't keep a roof over their head on these wages. They end up working and being in shelters, which is just, I mean, they fit in with everybody else. I mean, a major issue would be to organize unions in a lot of these places they work, and unfortunately, the labor movement is much weaker than it used to be, and people are not joining unions, which is part of why wages as a whole are down. So, you know, we've seen a sort of stagnation of wages for the bottom 70% of the population over the last, since the late 1970s, as the unions have declined and the manufacturing jobs moved overseas. What's left behind are unorganized, low-paying service jobs. So to the extent those places could get organized and unionized, that's one thing can be done, and obviously the other thing is having a substantial increase in the minimum wage. That's why the fight for 15 has been so outspoken, and really saying, you know, $15, you can sort of begin to see your way clear. But of course that's, you know, and there are some places that's actually been enacted. In our state, we're stuck at 7.25. Forget it's 15. We can't get. We've been trying for 10. They're stuck at, you know, they're stuck at 7.25. So, but those are things that could be done. Is to, you know, the other thing, of course, is people, you know, can increase their skill levels, but you know that's overrated, unfortunately, because there's so many jobs that people have to do that don't require high skills and are available and need to be done that we can't do without. So somebody's got to be doing them, and they just should. We need to find a way to make sure that they pay a living wage so that people can make ends meet and support themselves. People have very few rights in this country. I mean, you have a right to struggle, and but I mean, what people should have, they should have paid sick time. They should have family leave. If they're a woman, that if they have a child, they should have paid leave to have a child, be able to raise her. People should have health insurance. I mean, these are things that, the minimal things that people should have. People should have some paid time off, and you know, obviously they should have a decent wage that they can. You know, I mean, just people are just struggling so hard out here, and you know, there's no prospect. I mean, that's part of what's driving this election. That's why Donald Trump is even remotely in the picture, because there's a lot of fairly desperate people who don't see any way out. You know, I don't see Donald Trump as having the answer, but he's sort of projecting in some general way that I'm going to fix everything, and people have a desperate need for things to get fixed, and there's really, you know, unless we can have a solid increase of $10 to $15 minimum wage and a lot of the other things we've talked about, people are got a pretty bleak future, and so that's what's driving. That's what drove the Bernie Sanders campaign also. You know, that people wanted a vision of a country where the wealth is shared, and so you know that people need these rights, and they're not going to be rights, but they should be guarantees that people have, you know, a decent wage, decent health insurance, decent, you know, family leave, and, you know, things like that. There ought to be a living wage that people can make. There ought to be a standard that people, you know, that if an employer wants to be in business, he should be in a position to pay a living wage. And unfortunately, a lot of people say, oh, these poor businesses, they're not going to make it. If you raise them in a wage, you're going to go broke. Well, it's very possible they should go broke. If the only way that they can maintain their profitability is by exploiting people at very low wages, then maybe that's not a business that we need. We'll find a way to move things around and find people that can. I mean, you know, plenty of companies are making a lot of money that could pay a lot more, and then if there's some small companies that can't at all do it, then, you know, I mean, I'm sorry, but you know, that's a price that we shouldn't have to pay of exploited people and you know, sleeping in shelters and so forth. And we got people going to sell their blood to make ends meet. You know, it's just crazy. The Governor Wolf, has been supporting a 10-10 minimum wage. We've worked with Governor Wolf very carefully. We've been working with a lot of members of the Senate and the House that are, you know, we have a prime sponsor of the minimum wage bill, Senator Tartaglione from Philadelphia, Senator Haywood from Montgomery County and Philadelphia County has been very active on this issue. Representative Patty Kim has put a bill in the House. She's from the Harrisburg area. So yeah, we worked. You know, mostly they're Democrats. We have a few Republicans that have been supportive, and you know, the result is we've got a strong demand, but what we don't have is a piece of legislation that's going to pass, at least not in the very near term. Well, it's interesting. We'll see what happens in the election. I mean, one of the things we're doing right now is we're trying to remind people in the state that if 75% of you think the minimum wage should go up and they can't even get a vote, maybe you ought to think about that on election day. And we're having a series of events next week to wake people up. We're doing opinion pieces that we're putting in the papers just to try to remind people that this is an issue that, because of the leadership, which is controlled by the Republican Party, that we can't get a vote, and it's unclear how we're going to get a vote. So maybe people need to think about that when they go to the polls and vote. Over 2 million people in Pennsylvania would get a raise if the minimum wage went to $15, and over 500,000 of them are raising children, and these are people that need more money. And the other thing is, really, if you put that money into people's pockets, they're going to spend it, and they're going to stimulate the economy. And, we're talking like $3 billion of new spending that would go in the Pennsylvania economy if people had more wages. And that is a big plus. I mean, 60 to 70% of the U.S. economy is based on consumer spending. The consumer spend, people make things. They're not going to they're not going to build phones if nobody has any money to buy a phone. They're not going to buy a TV if people can't afford a TV. The more money people have, the more they're going to spend, and the more jobs are going to be created. So while a lot of times they talk about, they're all going to lay these people off, in fact, what's going to happen is if people have more money, they're going to spend it, and they're going to stimulate the economy. So those are some issues I think that are important to think about when you think about minimum wage.